blast off.
Lift off in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition.
This is ground control. Please write your orbit.
Yes, write
This
your
is an
orbit.
atmosphere.
Write your orbit.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Out of orbit, no gravity.
Oh, and here we are, everybody. Welcome to the Chat People's Podcast.
We made it to
As
space.
always, I'm Mikey, and I'm joined by Stacy, Davi, and Steve.
Hi.
Steve from
Hey,
Outer
Steve.
Space, Steve.
Outer Space
We're
Steve.
going to
I
talk
am
about
Major Tom.
video
I'm
game
escaping-
things.
I'm escaping major virus pandemic stuff and the
In outer
post-apocalypse.
space.
Fuck this game.
Oh gosh.
I hate it.
And if you didn't realize, you realize now that we are talking about Last of Us 2. This is going to be a spoiler cast. Anything and everything is off the table.
On the
So
table.
If you haven't played it yet,
Oh, on the table.
Go.
Yeah,
Although we could be
everything
pretty
anything
mad
is
and
on
just
the
sweep it
table.
all off the table again.
Exactly.
You know what?
Flip
We're
the
gonna
damn
flip the
table
table.
over.
We're gonna
Exactly.
flip the table.
Flip the table over. All
That's
right, guys.
right.
So we're just gonna get
Table.
started about talking about like general feel for the game, and I think like we'll naturally let sort of the conversation lead us from there. But anyone want to go first?
this game.
I just finished this Friday. So I got home from work, I want to say about 6:37, threw on the PlayStation and just powered through the rest of it. So I was playing it initially. I was like, I'm doing a couple hours here and there. And I was just like, now I'm in Seattle day 3 as Abby. We're getting close to like the converging of the story points.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, all right, let me just try and finish it. And then I got to the point where you're Ellie and Dina, and they're living in the house with the baby. And I was like, oh, it's the end of the game. Great. It wasn't the end of the game.
Wasn't the end of the game.
And they never ever lived happily ever
after
because
again.
fuck you. You want something
I should
happy
have
to
known
happen.
the game was going to try and subvert my expectations in that way.
And that was okay.
Which I guess, but it feels like, on my first reflection, one of the first thoughts I had is, this is subversion of expectation in the game.
Yeah.
Right?
And
Like,
in
everything
some
was
ways,
trying to fly against tropes, except for the overarching story, which was this revenge plot.
yeah.
And something that tells us revenge is bad, which every TV show or movie has done in the existence of humanity.
I watched rated R movies with my parents when I was 5.
Right.
And
We
other than
know
my mom
revenge is bad.
apparently wanted me to learn these lessons, she just didn't want me to look at the titties.
So I guess my question is, if I know going into this revenge is bad and you want to give me grown-up story, why didn't you subvert my expectation there?
Right. So they do a little bit, but to be clear, this is not Ellie's game,
It's
in
not.
my opinion.
It's not. But it's also not at its heart like the story of the game and the actual action of what you do in the game are very much at odds with each other. You're still very much scrounging bullets, upgrading your gun, and shooting people in the head. That
It's
is most of what you
overall
do.
the same game gameplay-wise.
Yeah.
I don't think they really improved much aside from what gadgets you have at your disposal.
They didn't even make it possible to knock people out instead of killing them, which you see
Sure.
increasingly in games like
I
this.
mean,
Right.
that's been there
And I think-
like for forever. I think that's an intentional choice, more or less. To be fair, most games that allow you to knock people out are a fantasy. If you hit someone in the back of the head that hard, if you don't kill them, you probably have caused brain damage. The idea that that is the good version of what you're doing is a fantasy.
Especially if you have robot arms like in Deus Ex.
Sure. Right. Boom! Like that dude
Exactly.
is dead.
So I have some issues with this game. I'm not going to say I loved it as much as the first game because I don't think I did. I think they wanted to make a game about Abby, right? But they had to tie in Joel and Ellie some way. Yes, your best friend
Well,
Abby.
So
Because
I
Joel and
disagree in
Ellie,
some ways, but
for me, like Joel's death felt really unimportant. One, upon reflection of what I played through, felt really unimportant. It was just a way to drive the plot forward. and Ellie just being like still just this damaged person who goes on a revenge spree.
So what
Like, didn't
what I
do
don't
it for
like,
me.
what I
And
don't
then
like,
they try
and
to
I don't
make
buy.
Abby this like pillar of good almost.
Ooh,
They
I
try
was
they
not
try
very
they
agree
try
with
to
that.
make Abby so relatable when she comes into the story as someone who's torturing Joel.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I
that's
don't like
definitely.
the divergence of the character there.
Well,
Because
it's
if you're trying to make Abby this great character, but then her intro is destroying Joel with a golf club,
sure. Well,
and she has no
let's be
remorse
clear.
for anything she did either.
The
Not once through
closest
the
No.
thing,
story does
the
she feel bad
closest
for
thing,
anything.
right? That's true. The closest thing that this, well, that's almost true. The closest thing that this game has to a good character is Lev. The closest thing. Most characters in this game are evil by our standards, and that's okay. That can be interesting. I'm interested by what you mean by that Joel's death felt unimportant. I think that this game essentially reveres Joel. Realistically speaking, in this world, like, you don't die because you deserve to die. You die because this world sucks and people
Yeah.
die. And to be clear, Joel deserved it.
He did.
Look, we agree
Well,
that Joel is a bad guy.
And
Right?
so I
That's
don't view
something we could
this
say.
as Ellie's
It's-
story or Abby's story being separate in the same way you guys do. I see such strong parallels and how much effort they put into making those parallels exist between Abby's story and Ellie's story. That I
Yeah.
think what we're seeing in Abby is we're seeing future Ellie in some ways. So Ellie, and I can easily imagine a Last of Us 3 where Ellie decides to do something good with her life,
Mhm.
right? And this is the journey that Abby is already on.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I agree a little bit more with Stacey as to say, like, I think these two stories were set together as parallels to show, and I mean, you can also, they also sort of foreshadow, you know, the events of the island. I think it's just like, okay, guys, so if Ellie
So-
starts with this and involves Jackson in this, you know, what's to say that eventually the natural end of this conflict, starting with one death, that some who was justifiably sort of murdered, you know, it could
Abby
tear
is
two
for
communities
personally
me,
apart.
like
they do
she
a
did
lot
some.
in this section where you're going to the aquarium.
Yeah,
There's a lot that they make Ellie do to make you to kind of like vilify her almost in your eyes.
yeah,
And then when they swap the perspective to Abby, they try to do more to make her look worse.
mm,
And
Yeah,
I
like they
don't
make you
like
play
that
catch with the
because
dog that Ellie kills.
right. So it's like, oh, you play fetch with the dog a whole bunch, and that makes Abby a better person. I don't.
yeah,
It's a
I
little
see
bit
what they were
cheap.
going. I see what they were going for. I just don't like the way they did it, especially when you build attachment to characters like Ellie from the first game, because the whole point of the first game was to attach you to Ellie
Well,
and make you feel like you had to protect her.
one thing that's very clear to me about this game is it's not meant to be pleasant, and that's
No,
fine.
it's not.
That's okay. I see what you mean, like, in terms of not liking it, but I would almost like pivot the question from did you like it to was it meaningful?
Right. It's a little bit like movie reviews. There's always been a dichotomy where some people don't like the popular movies because they're too cheapy and easy and they're not particularly deep. And then other people don't like the I
Foo-foo.
guess Oscar bait,
Oscar, yeah,
if you will, because it's just trying too freaking hard to make you feel stuff
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
most unpleasant way possible in order to impress you somehow.
Yeah, fuck the
Yeah.
master. The master sucks.
Overall I enjoyed the game. Overall I enjoyed the story. I enjoyed the impact that it had to show you that like these are emotionally damaged people in a very tough time, and they all have their own story and their own reason for doing what they're doing. I
Yeah.
just think the overdoing the subversion of expectation and doing a little too on the nose of trying to build these characters the way you want people to see them, because people are going to see that anyway, because this game series is done like adult writing, right? Like
Yeah.
this is the stuff we want people to feel and understand and pick up on the nuance of, and they're going to do that because this is, you're trying to age or grow up your, you know, your writing for a more nuanced kind of approach.
Yeah. One
You
of
know
my
what I'm trying
things
to
with
say?
this one of my things with this game is a lot of people are celebrating like the wrong thing, in my opinion. So like performance wise, technologically wise,
Mhm.
well done.
The
This is
facial animations alone, Just
Very
when you watch
impressive.
the struggle of Ellie stealthily taking down somebody,
Yeah,
you see the
face.
struggle in the face.
But
Yeah.
when
Fantastic.
people tell me that the writing is great, I really want to push back because
I don't
love
think that the
video
writing is
games.
great.
I think the
Yeah.
symbolism is great. Some of the individual lines are pretty, it reminds me a little bit of the Lucasfilm dialogue problem.
The
Right?
environmental writing is
We've
good.
got this plotted
Yeah.
out 5 generations ahead, so it has to go a certain way. So
Mm.
even though we can't write a plausible character that would do the things we want them to do, we're just going to force them into that box.
Yeah.
And that feels a little bit like what's happened,
Yeah.
particularly with Ellie.
I don't
who
buy
just-
Ellie.
Yeah. Yeah, it just, and also in particular, the relationship with Dina, I think was problematic and could have been done better in a couple of ways. So they've made Dina
Problematic in what way?
So they wanted to make Dina different from Ellie, but ultimately supportive of her. And they did that by making Dina Jewish and having her have a relationship with a dude before Ellie, and then making her pregnant, which is kind of a reveal during the game. And all of that does contribute, but the pregnancy ends up sidelining Dina so that her opinion basically stops mattering.
Right.
At some point.
She stops. That's where she stops mattering as a character, is how I feel.
And
She
that's
became pregnant
problematic.
and useless.
Yeah,
It's
once-
just like okay.
And
I
that's
don't,
where
I don't love
feel.
that message. to society, by the way.
yeah.
That's where I feel a lot of the characters.
I
Tend
mean,
to fall
that's
flat,
what they
is
made.
because-
That's what they
hold on.
made.
because they use these characters, a lot of these side characters, as just pieces to move the plot forward, and then
Basic
they're
foils.
completely irrelevant to the story.
Or
They
they're
are
after a
very
certain point.
simple foils in which, they have a particular take on things. They never waver from that perspective.
Right. So
Um,
like Manny only matters for that encounter with Tommy, the sniper, which I think was done really well because it makes
It's
you
one of the
hate the
better
sniper.
parts of the game.
It makes you
Yeah.
hate that sniper behind it, and then you realize it's Tommy, and then all of a sudden you have these conflicting feelings about how to feel about it.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
was like
that's
two
Yeah.
shots. I was like 2 shots into it when I was just like, "Fuck, this is Tommy."
Yeah. So you have Dina in that moment, you have Manny in that moment, and a lot of them
Yeah.
just kind of feel like they're there to advance. They're more like plot devices than
right.
characters.
And I actually
Yeah.
want to call out Jesse as being an exception to that rule. He was
Yes,
well
yeah.
written.
Yeah, Jesse was
actually.
good.
He was like, the moment he ingratiated himself with me was when he gave Ellie shit and made her uncomfortable about like having a kiss with Dina, and then
Yes.
just being like, "I don't care.
yeah.
These are over. We are adults."
Yeah.
Yeah. That was
That was
Yeah.
the good Jesse moment for me. Like that's what made me feel that way too.
But of course, that's vital because
And-
then it matters so much when Ellie goes off course and Jesse's just like,
what the fuck.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna get Tommy. That's what
Yeah.
you said we were gonna do.
You said
so
we were gonna
whatever
get
you're
Tommy.
doing. So
Yeah, like I don't know what you're doing, girl.
And that's where I kind of like lose Ellie a little bit too, is because she's on this quest for revenge, and then all of a sudden she agrees that it's too much with everything going on. You got Dina pregnant, you got Jesse there, you just got Tommy back, and she's still adamant about going after Abby.
Yeah.
And it's almost like, and then even then from there, right? You go after Abby, she bests you again, right? And then leaves you alive again, and then you have that whole end moment where Tommy comes back and is like, "You made me a promise," and then she goes and does
Tommy
it
made
again.
no sense in that scene.
Yeah.
Tommy
Like, it
didn't make-
reversed his whole shit.
The only
Yeah.
subversion of expectation on revenge there is that they did it 3 times.
So
they did the
I
same thing 3 times.
I do think that the final sequence is good in some ways. I overall have no criticism about the final act where you play as Ellie.
no,
I
I don't.
Mm,
I think that it is exhausting that she still wants to do this, and that's part of the point. I think that it's actually kind of adorable and interesting that she inadvertently rescues her. And I actually do think that the moment when Ellie decides to give up on revenge is decent.
I think the way when you said exhausting, it triggered something in my head to say that's how I felt playing the game at that point. I was exhausted
yeah.
of having
Yeah.
to go through more infected and more people
Yeah.
just to chase down Abby again.
And I
Yeah.
think that
Yeah.
might be on purpose, honestly.
Oh, I think so too.
It might be.
Yeah.
I think so too. And one of the things I really liked, and here I'm going to go to the next bit about like the role of choice in this game. For me, the original sin, if you will, of Last of Us is they kind of make Joel kill the doctor, and even if you as a player somehow didn't kill the doctor and decided just to end the game there, in order to save Ellie. When
Turn
you
it
start
on.
Last of Us 2, the first thing that is made clear to you is in this
He
version of the
killed
plot,
the
he killed the
Yeah.
doctor. It's required in order for this game to work, right?
Yeah.
So it's taking that choice away from Joel, and they do it again in this game. For example, with Nora, not only they make you press the button to hurt Nora, but they make it clear that Ellie did a lot more torturing off camera, and she feels
Yeah.
terrible about
But they
it.
also
Yeah.
did the same thing with that making you press the button on Abby at the end of the game too, because she's
So-
there
Yeah.
crying in the water.
So yes,
the
they
same.
kind of did, but one thing they did that I liked is they give you two boats, right? So there's a boat that theoretically Ellie could leave by herself, and then there's going towards the boat that Abby is on in order to exact revenge. And you can attempt to go to the other boat, and you'll get some dialogue from Ellie that's basically her mixed feelings about what she's doing, but she still decides to go after Abby. She will not get on the boat. But at
Yeah.
least you as a player, you're trying to guide her, and you realize it doesn't work because she's just too driven.
Yeah.
And the linearity can work as like a sort of metaphor for being like revenge drunk. But I still think that when you zoom out to that level, you're left with a game where the lack of choice has something to do with the characters and what state they're in, but it also has to do with a vision of people that I don't agree with. Like the idea that it's so difficult for these people to run away instead of fighting you when you
Yeah.
have killed many of their friends is a little silly. And the game almost never does anything to subvert this. The best time that it does is probably the little encounter with the people who mistook you for wolves hunting them down for being deserters.
Yeah.
There's never
There's
really a moment that like it just makes you kill people, right? Like that's the thing is how many hundreds of thousands of people did
If
you
you're
kill?
gonna survive, you
Yeah,
have to
like
kill.
so
Like, is there
the
a
very first
population
time you
left
run
in
into
Seattle at this point?
yeah, seems like you've killed a lot of them, right?
Yeah.
So it does, like the first time you run across wolves in Seattle, it's just like, nope, we've got an order from Isaac, who's the head guy, saying to
Right.
kill all trespassers. Boom, that's it. Now you're forced to kill like at least a half dozen people before you leave that building.
Mhm.
Like you
Mm.
decimate them.
Yeah.
And I tried to go in to find if is there any way I can avoid that, and it's absolutely there's no way.
The game
Yeah.
They
makes you
will
kill
kill you
dogs
if you don't kill
Well-
and
them.
then scolds you for killing dogs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
So-
I wanted to add something to Stacy about the choice bit in the sense of like, I mean that's a larger video game issue of like, and I think I'd like to get a creator's take of if you're not going to give me choice, then why do I need to press the button on something that I don't want to do? Because like, what's the point?
Right. Just make it a
It-
cutscene.
Just make it a
Well, right.
cutscene.
The
Let
point-
me,
the point is
let
to
me
make you do
try and
something
tell
you
the
don't wanna
character
do.
not to do it, but then they do it anyway. I'm okay
Right.
with that more than I
Yeah.
am making me press the button to do something I disagree
Right.
with.
It reminds
Right.
me, if you guys ever played Fear Effect back in the PlayStation day,
No.
at the very end of the game, there is an ambiguous choice that you make between two characters, and you might think that the character that you're choosing is the character that you are selecting to live, but you actually end up selecting the character that dies, and it doesn't tell you that. Like, there are
That's
ways that you
rough.
can fuck with choice,
Yeah.
and like that story is about taking these two characters that you're playing as and making you unclear about who you want to live.
So here's
Yeah.
why
And I just want to
I
say very
think
quickly,
that-
like we've been doing this better generations ago.
right.
That's
So I
part of
think
why.
that because the way I see Naughty Dog going is the same way like you said earlier how like Kojima games are going is they just want to make TV shows and movies. So you might as well take the choice out of it and tell the story you actually want to tell instead of having to give the player agency on making the choice and then forcing them down the road they don't want to go down.
Yeah.
And I don't wanna
they're
say that
making
this
an
game-
HBO version of Last of Us, and I don't think
Right.
that's a coincidence. It probably would make a better TV series.
I think it would.
Than a
I think
video
the only difference is that you won't get the encounters won't be as interesting because you don't have a hand in them. Right? It's interesting when you're able to get through an encounter in a specific way without using minimal resources.
And to be clear, the game
That's the only thing that
is
won't translate.
Of course.
the game is aided by interactivity. I've had
Yes.
moments in this game where I had to recoil because of the violence that I was committing, because it is actually expertly produced.
Mhm.
Like shooting someone's arm off and having them scream for 10 seconds while the fight continues is fucking affecting. Like, it's weird. Most games, you kill someone and they just drop and do ragdoll or
Canned
whatever.
animations.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
you
it
can
doesn't
actually
feel
have a
like you
moment
just
where you're
killed a
not sure,
person.
where you're
Also,
not sure
They're
someone's
dead.
dead or not.
Yeah,
And they're
yeah.
just kind of lingering there for a
Yeah.
while, and you kind of like,
a series might
I guess
actually
I
work
better
better
keep an eye on
because
that guy.
there's that
Yeah.
much less scavenging being done. You know,
Mm.
you're not spending 4 hours walking around Seattle looking for every single scrap of metal and every single pill to pop.
And what I think is
Thank
relevant
God
is
Ellie has a dagger, I tell you.
Yeah.
what I think is
Well,
relevant when you
it
look
was
at
so much better that she had the knife and you didn't have to craft shivs. I loved
Yeah.
that part of it.
yeah, but I think that like what's relevant here is like if you look at how little the gameplay really evolved in all these years from Last of
Mhm.
Us Part One, like that is what Naughty Dog appears, at least Naughty Dog leadership appears to be invested in and interested in doing. So like, go make the Last of Us TV show, go make a digital TV show like Ruby or something else. Have fun, but if you're gonna make a game, like you need to like
Give us
actually
some
no, if you're
advancement in
gonna make a
gameplay.
TV show, when they make this TV show, like the writing needs to be better.
Yeah.
Mm.
Because I think
Well,
the problem
yeah.
here is why it also got stale for me faster is because the gameplay is the same. They didn't innovate anything aside from a prone position that you can hide in the grass.
It's
And
minor. It's
Nothing.
an
the
evolution, but it's not.
It's small, right? It just
and
felt like more of the same.
friendly AI in particular, I want to call out as being kind of BS. I really
It
wish,
was
like, one of the
terrible.
things I wish they had done with Dina is make her a little more nonviolent.
Yes.
Let's say she would have been okay with killing infected, but not with killing people. So when there were fights with people, she would hide instead.
Yeah.
That would
Yeah.
have really greatly improved the game and also given her a different perspective from Ellie on what
Yeah.
they're doing.
So
And that
Yeah.
was a real missed opportunity.
my
honestly.
problem with
Yeah.
the AI is the AI got in the way more than they did anything else. So there
In
was
terms
one
of
particular
immersion, hell yeah.
with one particular instance where I was Abby and I was with Lev, and there was a crack in the wall you had to go through. But then I realized I missed something.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, let me go back. And Lev was just standing in the way of the crack, and I couldn't get through. And he didn't move. I had to run away like into
To make
another
him
room
move
for him
elsewhere,
to
yeah.
make him move. And then
Yeah.
a couple of times, Dina knocked me out of cover while I was in an
Oh
encounter.
wow.
That happened to me like
Because
5 times.
in the
Yeah.
first
Okay.
game, when you're Joel and Ellie does such a good job hiding with Joel, so that if she goes in the same spot as you, Joel kind of like covers her, right?
For whatever reason, Lev I
Mm.
think was the worst case actually, which
Lev
is
was
funny
the
because
worst
I
I
for
thought
liked
me.
him.
Jesse was actually the best companion.
And
Yeah.
it's
Mm.
especially
Jesse did the
weird
most
with
work.
Love
Yeah.
because here you've got an archer who
Yes.
theoretically they should look for cover far away from you because that's
Yeah.
their best.
It might have been the
No.
level design during those segments, particularly the
That's their
building that you
strategy.
go down. I don't know.
Yeah. I was
Yeah.
watching a clip from Angry Joe's review, which he got really critical of the game. But he had a point where like he was on cover here, and then Dina was right around the corner. And you know how the AI will call out enemies coming towards you?
Yeah.
Only called out the clicker right as it got to him and killed him immediately.
Yeah.
So it was
And
like,
another thing I didn't like, it really breaks immersion when you have a friendly AI and they're kind of walking around
Walking all
relatively
around.
openly.
Yeah.
Well,
It
if you
totally
get
breaks
spotted, it's end of everything
And
for
here's
you.
the thing.
Come here, and then they're walking in front of the
If you
enemy, and you're
wanna
like,
if you
what?
wanna like seriously consider like being on the cutting edge of telling stories in video games, you need to work on your AI.
yes.
I am sick of this shit. Like, Death Stranding has an entire foundational to the universe conceit for not interacting with other people in any meaningful way. Like Red Dead Redemption, everyone's just a fucking asshole. This
So
game,
if they act
the
like
AI
jerks,
is
that's
kind
in
of
character.
whatever, I guess, and it's a Rockstar thing. So
I
like
will
fucking around
say
with the environment
that
is one thing. Like the best like I give a shit about these characters that I can think of is from a gameplay perspective is State of Decay, because you play
the
as all of them.
the enemy AI is probably the best part of the AI. When you're fighting people, because they will flank you once they find your position, they will go and
Yeah.
investigate bodies. They will, the Seraphites will do the whistling thing, you know.
Yeah.
So
And
the
the
enemy
new
AI is really good. It's just the companion AI is terrible.
yeah, the new Infected and the Seraphites were both really well done, and that you could
Yeah.
see the effort that they put into finding something different that would challenge players and that would specifically challenge them after they had skilled up for a while.
Yeah.
and felt like they were managing everything else really well.
Can we all
That's true.
agree that we hate stalkers?
I like
Yes.
fighting them.
I
hate
absolutely
stalkers.
I like the way they
I
hide.
can't stand them. I
I
can't
like-
stand it. I hate
Yeah.
it because like as soon as you're found out, they rush you from the side so quickly.
Well,
Yeah.
so
It's like,
one
I'm
of the
fucked.
major problems
well-
with these games in general is the single shot kill, right?
Mm.
Where it's simply them touching you and you're dead.
Yeah.
Like
Right,
that
because
whole
if there's
scenario
more
is
than
silly.
one of them, like
Yeah.
they'll kind of gang up on you, and once you're kind of in a situation where there's two enemies
Yeah.
on
If
either
you're
side,
if
you
you're
can get
space
stuck with
wise,
collision issues.
Yeah.
And
you're
and
Yeah.
that's where like if the dodge got me out of it, I wouldn't feel as bad, but the collision issues with the dodge
Mm.
kind of just made it worse and a little more tedious for
I'm
me.
okay with that
I
because
get
I'm
that.
used to managing space. I
Yeah.
enjoy
Yeah.
that in combat. So like I know like, oh, okay, stalkers, whatever. But what I like about stalkers is they behave the most human, right?
Yeah.
Runners, "Wah!" Clickers, where's the sound? I'm gonna go bite that. Stalkers are crafty motherfuckers. And
Yeah.
and in a game about like that has their own version of zombies and it's post-apocalypse, like there's this question of what is the monster and what is the human. That is a classic theme for the genre. And they play with that in terms of where we see certain characters going with their revenge quests and all that kind of stuff. And I like that, and I like the Stalker's introduction because of that, where it's just like that thing seems a little closer to human.
Yeah,
Mm. Yeah.
which is
Um,
weird because the progression is runner, stalker, clicker. You'd think that the more human-like would be the runner.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, true. I
Well-
wanted to sort of move the conversation just a little to, I guess, the second half of the game, because I think you focus on certain characters when you talk about the beginning, but the second half, like you mentioned, Lev and his sister, and getting a little bit more in depth with, characters that you meet as Abby, or getting, more backstory other than, the group of people that helped kill Joel. So I did want to say that I did enjoy. What's Lev's sister's name? I forgot her name.
I forgot
Yara.
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 Yeah.
So Yara and Lev. I actually didn't mind their inclusion into the story. I thought generally like their arc was like good. I just did not like the detour to the island. I felt the plot.
Mm.
It was just sloppy. Like
Yeah, they needed an excuse
What?
to have us see the WLF fuck up a community.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's what it was.
Yeah,
I think we
get,
wanted to see that we're all monsters on
Yeah,
some
I
levels.
get the foreshadowing as well. It's just like
Yeah,
This
it's like
seems
if they're
like-
doing this to this community, then what does it mean for Jackson?
yeah, and it's just like this is so like lazy and predictable, and I felt like the whole thing was sort of meaningless in the sense of like
Eh,
you were introduced to Isaac only for him to get like I feel like if you took that whole part out of the story, it didn't make any sense. All it was, like Steve was saying, all it was another audition for Abby to show what a great person she is. It's like, oh, let's just show Abby as a great person.
I
'Cause
don't know
nothing
that I
really
agree because she kind of
happens.
hacks and slashes her way to a boat. She's
That's
willing to
sh-
kill any number of people
She
under
does,
any
but
I mean,
circumstance.
but
in
but
the
in a
cutscenes,
sense,
To save
yeah,
one
specifically, it's
person.
the cutscenes that
Yeah.
take place in the arena there, and when she goes to meet Isaac, they try to
Yeah.
build her as this like
Yeah.
the best person in the story.
yeah,
Right.
and
Well, I
Well,
disagree. I'd definitely
the
say
story
Rockland.
just
Story-
functioned for it
right.
to improve to create like
To
this
make you feel
sort
for
of
her.
yeah.
They want you
and-
to feel for Abby.
But for
Well-
me, it wasn't natural. Like I'm saying, like if they
So,
cut that whole entire part out of
like,
the game,
from
it wouldn't
a-
have
I
meant
think I
anything.
disagree.
Yeah, from a plot thematic standpoint, I was expecting them to go back to Jackson and for the wolves to enact revenge that way. I feel like what they did by going to the island was they kind of diverted that energy somewhere else. And in a way that was more interesting to me than going back to Jackson would have been just even more exhausting and predictable and painful.
What's vital about
I
the
thought
Seraphites?
the Jackson wouldn't have been predictable
So-
because in
so-
a sense I think there was this tacit admission from Maria, Tommy's wife, to be like, so you're gonna take care of this. We're not really getting involved, and I think that was almost made clear in the meeting of just like, you take care of this.
Yeah,
Whatever happens, you understand that this is your thing.
Yeah.
and that was on her part
Yeah.
foolish.
Probably naive.
So
honestly.
I agree. So the thing that's key about the Seraphites is we know almost nothing about them. And the whole of Abby's arc is, okay, I've committed revenge. I don't feel a ton better. I still have nightmares. I have a nightmare about those people who I left in the shed. Okay, fuck this. Let me go help them. And it's a betrayal of the wolves, period. But she does it anyway because she's like, I'm done having a heavy conscience. And this is a story about, even though it focuses on individuals, in the background, it's a story about communities, how they
Yeah.
form, who's
Yeah.
the in-group, who's the out-group.
Yeah.
Abby's success is saying, they used to be the out-group, but I'm done with this. And to be clear, she's keying off of Owen, who was done with this. And like, that is a good
Owen's
story
another
to
interesting
tell.
character,
I
like
like
Jesse.
Owen.
Yeah.
For me, it would have been more interesting if you wanted to make Abby this kind of like lead into the betrayal of the wolves. I think make the Joel portion of it relevant too, because that takes a lot of.
It's not that it's irrelevant. It's just not. They don't connect the dots.
Right. So she should have had that weight on her conscience on some level, only because look what she did to him. Right.
People don't talk about their feelings in this game.
Yeah. So she
Yeah.
blasted him in the
It's
leg
a-
with a shotgun, right,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
beat him within an inch of his life with a golf club. Right.
Yeah.
That's heavy stuff.
Yeah,
And if you want her to be a relatable
having
character,
a nightmare about Joel.
right, show that.
Yeah.
I don't need to know that Ellie has PTSD about it because Ellie was there. I know that already. I can connect those dots.
Yeah.
But show how it affected Abby too,
Yeah.
because you want Abby to be this character that you're trying to make everybody see in a specific light, but also show what she did and how it weighed on her conscience.
And they don't
That's
connect
one
the,
there.
they don't connect the dots. They are subtle. I don't love that. I think that they're up their ass with their subtlety.
Yeah.
But to be clear,
so
to
we
be
need
clear,
to talk about that too.
Abby convinced everyone from the group that was in the hospital that she knew to
Yeah.
go along with this, and then she told Owen that everyone, including his girlfriend, is down, got everyone to do it, went off on her own, happened to find Joel, don't like the serendipitous, but whatever.
Yeah.
Happened to find Joel, murdered him, then they go back, and like, it's very important, actually, in my mind, that Mel says to Abby's face, you're a piece of shit, and you always have been.
Right.
Mm.
That's when they were about
Yeah.
to leave for the
Yeah.
on the boat, right?
Yeah.
When Mel says, "We don't want you coming with us, and you'll ruin those kids' lives too."
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, you're a
Yeah.
bad example, basically.
Yeah.
Which makes it really interesting that she's gone and rescued Lev, who's probably the kindest person and the most real person in this game in some ways. So like here's how I see it. We see in Abby a future version of Ellie. I can almost see Abby becoming a future version of Joel, where she tries to settle down, do something good, keep her head down, lay low, maybe even change her name or something, and then somehow gets dragged back into it.
And the
Somehow.
game backs that up with the gameplay.
Right. She's
She
very much an
plays
analog.
like Joel.
Yeah. But what I don't know is like what's going to happen with Lev. If we have a game 3, are we going to explore archery a little more, or are we going to have a third type of player character? What are we doing here?
Lev versus Potato.
I mean, my
You know?
my sort of mental, just like sort of wonderings about it would be, if they're going back to the Fireflies, maybe they say like, hey, we've figured out like how to create a virus, and Abby has to go search for Ellie, and you know, there's going to be some sort of convincing of like, hey, we actually know how to make this thing now. You're not going to die from it, and maybe, you know, maybe play between that. Maybe the Seraphites are involved again. They find out something, but I feel like they're not going to throw the Seraphites away. And now that Abby's here to stay, I do feel like they're going to justify her involvement in the story by actually letting them sort of make peace with whatever they
when
have.
you think about it, even sorry to cut you off, Stacey,
Yeah.
is that if you think about the power vacuums that are left
Yeah.
in this series, you have a power vacuum in the Seraphites and a power
Isaac.
vacuum in the Liberation Front. Those are the two places where I think you build your next antagonists, quote unquote,
Yeah.
around the Fireflies trying to make the cure, if you go that route.
Mm.
Yeah.
And maybe Jackson's an ally somehow.
But
Yeah.
even
Maybe
then,
they're
I don't
just
know.
Wiped
I don't know
out by
where
the
you go.
wolves in between.
Like for me,
wouldn't be
I don't
shocked.
think I want to see another Last of Us game.
So
Well-
what I
don't
don't
know.
like is that makes me unexcited about a part 3 is like, again, they have a worldview that is shit. They think everyone is shit, and like I can take some of that, but like some people are not pieces of shit. Where
Yeah.
are they?
Yeah. Jesse isn't a piece of shit.
Well, they keep
Yeah.
dying.
They keep,
Well, we
and
agree.
that's the
Problem.
thing. And
Like
that's the thing.
Jesse and Tommy, they just die.
This
Yeah,
this narrative punishes people for being nice, but it's
Nice,
not
yeah.
like, but there's no other side of that. Like, to
Yeah.
compare it to Walking Dead, for example, that show also punishes people for being kind to other people. And I'm not talking about like giving them a flower. I'm talking about, I didn't murder you, I let you leave. Oh, and then you came back and you got my wife killed. And that's
Right.
like a lesson, but there's a lot of themes in that show about not losing yourself and not becoming a piece of shit. This game doesn't really have that alternative. Like,
Right.
there's things that they dangle in front of the characters.
You
That's
even
it.
have someone like Mel who has done her damnedest to stay out of it all, but she makes a mistake of falling for somebody who isn't as pure and kind as she is, and that's enough to do her in.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah. Basically.
It's rough. So
Yeah.
one thing I want to talk about is to the extent that this is Abby's game and we have issues with things like how long is the game and how tiring is the game. I really feel like the order that they put things in was another missed opportunity.
Yeah,
So,
I think so too. The flashbacks could have been better storyboarded out to make the story flow better, because it's kind of like, for me, it's the way the Game of Thrones books are written, right? From the perspective of different characters. You do all this build up, and then all of a sudden you drop to a different perspective, and you lose all that flow.
And then they made the Game of Thrones TV show problem, which was, we think that cool reveals are more important than
Right.
anything else.
Yeah, yeah.
well,
I
I feel like they were so focused on the idea of how do we transition people from Joel to Ellie to Abby, that they went about it in a very linear way, where each night when Ellie falls asleep, she has a dream about her past that is just very much all Ellie all the time, until suddenly we switch to Abby, and now it feels like, oh my God, I feel like I just finished a whole game and now you're going to make me play another game?
yeah.
It's like, oh my, like your eyes pop up like, I can't believe this is happening.
I did
And
not
then they
mind
go
that.
through every time Abby sleeps, she has an Abby memory. If they had done this by switching back and forth just to those flashbacks,
Between days.
it's
Yeah.
so easy to just move flashbacks around, that if they just alternated Ellie, Abby, something to that effect, we could have seen those parallels between their characters a lot sooner. We
Yeah.
could have had a better understanding of how Ellie was doing something that's arguably very unethical faster. And then I think it would have been less of a feeling like, ooh, gotcha, plot
Yeah.
twist.
Because
Yeah.
Which I
they
don't
make
like.
you do all the bad stuff as Ellie, and then they want to rub it in your face when you do the Abby switch.
It
Right,
really
and that's where it
feels
feels
like
like
they're just,
convenient.
it
Yeah.
feels cheap.
Yeah.
I
Also-
would say, though, I think that as a first playthrough, I'm okay with it. What if on a second playthrough it did that? It actually zigzagged them.
That would be really
Yeah.
interesting.
It would
In
be
fact,
interesting, but
would
I don't
love
think
to
they're
see
deep
them
enough to do that.
Yeah. Something
Yeah.
tells me they play tested that and maybe it didn't work the way we think it might have worked, to be
I
honest
don't
with you.
think,
I think
I don't
that's
think
fair.
so.
It might
It
I
could be.
think it
It
might
could
have
very
been
well be.
because just
Alternating
thinking,
between skill sets.
yeah, that too.
Yeah,
every
but
couple
the
hours.
initial flashbacks are them as kids, so it doesn't matter.
I just
Yeah.
They don't even
purely
use.
purely from a game perspective, your average
Mm.
gamer, if they're switching from
They're like
Lucio
teenagers.
to
Yeah.
Soldier 76
Yeah.
every 5 hours,
That has to
they're
be
gonna
something.
get
Yeah.
I'm
annoyed.
not
no,
saying
she's
they
talking
switch
about-
Ellie day one and Abby day one. I'm just saying just the dreams at night.
She's talking about the flashbacks,
Oh,
because the
gotcha.
flashbacks
That.
are very limited to walking.
Okay.
Almost
Gotcha.
exclusively
Then I
walking.
They're like
don't
walking
know.
simulator-y.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if they give us Abby flashbacks, but we're still playing as
Playing
Ellie
as
for the
Ellie.
whole first half of the game, I don't know how
Yeah.
that works.
Yeah.
It's possible. It's totally
Yeah.
possible.
But then it gives you the Abby side of the story you want to start pushing onto people,
Yeah,
right? Instead
just-
of pushing
just
it
to
on in
give
the
the
latter half
one-
of the game.
Just the one flashback of Abby where we realized that her dad was the doctor and that's why she went after Ellie. Just that would have made it a lot more clear what was going on.
Yeah, and also they did set a precedence in the sense of you start the game in the prelude as Ellie, and then all of a sudden you're switched to Abby. So in a
It wouldn't have
sense,
been
yes,
weird.
Stacey was right. I said they kind of set that precedent because although you didn't know that you would be playing as Abby in the beginning, they said that it kind of would have been like, oh, okay, I understand what I'm doing. Like they're gonna do this, like, okay, sometimes I'm
Back and
Ellie,
forth.
then we'll see what Abby's doing the same day. But instead they chose. That's why I say I feel like this was play tested, and they were like, it seems like people just rather do all Ellie
Ellie,
at the same
Ellie,
time,
Ellie.
like you're saying,
Abby,
Zavi,
Abby,
just
Abby.
like as a design perspective, and then let's all do Abby
Yeah.
at the same time because like
And
we want to have her fully fledged gameplay wise character because there are different skills.
and personally, I agree that
Mhm.
I would have liked for them to play with the structure, but I'm surprised, genuinely surprised, and practically disappointed that a lot of people in the game community that I actually respect
Mm.
did not have that same experience with Ellie. A lot of people were like, yeah, I was all on board with Ellie. Fuck Abby. I want to go kill her. And I was just like,
Mm.
what?
Yeah, it's
So
interesting you
the
say that, Zavi. Hold on a second, Steve, because I mean, a point I've actually been wanting to make is that as far, and I think I've told you guys privately, as far as like who the game wants you to care about, Abby got her revenge. She got a kill for a kill. Actually less than a kill for a kill because he, killed her father, but also the other doctors there. But as long as she got Joel, that was it. It doesn't show that she had to kill other people to get there, although you don't have to really imagine that she did. And then from the first day, after day one of Seattle, Ellie feels pretty justified, and then you can't really in your mind
She has
justify
revenge the
the
shit out
rest.
of
Yeah, the,
Joel.
the the 3 days of her just killing people just to get to this one woman. I mean, plus the epilogue, plus a relationship, a baby, and a new a new life.
All this,
The
right? She
amount the
gives up
amount
so
of
much.
cost,
Jesse
the amount of
dies.
cost for this freaking kill is just like, what?
It's absurd.
Which is
It's
what bothers me about Ellie's character, to go back
Yeah,
onto the
I
whole
think it
like
was
looping revenge trope that she
yeah.
follows is a little frustrating because you'd like to think that Ellie is better than that, and you've built up Ellie as a character who's supposed to be better than that from your first game. And
Yeah,
a lot of the
yeah,
reason people were on Ellie's side and standing Ellie so hard was because of how she's developed in the first game.
yeah, yeah.
They're attached
And
to that character, and then to come in and have another character take that happiness from Ellie, it makes people feel some kind of way.
and in a sense, they show that she has emotional maturity because she shows like, oh, okay, I can get through this hump with Joel, but no, we need the whole Last of Us Part 2 to show her emotional, sort of
And then on top of that, she was a
maturity.
dick to Joel in all the flashbacks.
most
Well,
of it.
that was
Yeah,
her
she was.
getting. I mean, but that was her
But also,
processing. Yeah,
fuck Joel.
yeah,
Yeah, well, he
that was
lied
her
to her on a
processing.
very fundamental level that took away
Yeah.
her agency. I think as a
They
teenager,
do
she has every
frame
right
that.
to be angry.
They do frame that correctly. I like that. But
Yeah,
I've said it before. Ludonarrative dissonance is okay. It is okay to use that as part of your game if there's a purpose. And the number of people she kills, that's all fair and that's part of it. But I think it points out how shackled the fact Naughty Dog is to this format of game
yeah,
and how it shackles their story.
yeah.
And like, if they don't change up how they are designing their games, they will never be able to tell a better version of this story.
Right.
No, they won't, because it's the Nathan Drake problem. It's just,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
after a certain while,
It's
you just
uncharted.
you don't relate to the character anymore. And I feel like I think people probably hated Abby because they thought that they could relate to her more, in spite of Ellie, not because like, all right, now what are Abby's motivations for whatever she's doing? So basically, after all that happens, after the thing happens with Joel, you're getting back to your camp. You find Lev and Yara. You kind of save them. You're doing all these nice things. Yada yada yada. But what is Ellie doing? Just killing people to get to Abby, while Abby's on this journey of self-discovery after she finally got her revenge kill.
And
It's
trying to
just like
steal Owen out from under
it's
Mel.
like Jada Pinkett and Will Smith. They've been
That's his
entangled.
entanglement.
It's a bad
Like-
case of codependence.
Like, yeah.
Yeah.
I just
So-
I just don't like certain things in the way they were framed and set up in this game, and I think that's what bothers me, because overall I think it
Yeah.
was a great experience. It left me in a state of melancholy when I was done with it, all that stuff, to the point where I'm like still trying to get into Ghost
One
of
could
Tsushima.
argue, doesn't
right?
that make this a good game? I mean,
It does,
didn't
and
it-
I'm not
yeah.
taking away from the fact that it's and
Yeah.
trying to say it's not a good game. There's just things and the way they framed it and the way they wrote it that just don't come forward as adult as they want it to be. They're kind of hand holding you through a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And if you want us to pick up on nuance, write nuance.
Right. If I was gonna be advising someone, I'd be like, wait till this game's on sale.
Right, but don't drag my
Oh,
head.
wow.
Don't grab me by the head
Yeah.
and move me forward to like, look how bad Ellie
Yeah.
is. Look
Yeah,
how dumb
yeah.
Ellie is.
I-
Like,
Okay, go ahead. Jinx.
Well, I'm gonna change subject, but I can do it at the last minute. But I do have one other thing.
I was going to say that like they're obsessed with show don't tell, and I know that that's like a thing that is good, but like they're so obsessed with it that no one in this fucking game talks about their fucking feelings, and it's fucking infuriating.
Yeah,
It's not entirely true, but it is mostly true.
It's mostly
Like
true.
Owen
Mostly
tries
true.
to get Abby
Yeah,
to talk. It
I-
doesn't work very well.
Who is probably like I think on the fucking spectrum because that dude's face is
And-
normally stone cold.
Yeah,
and his voice.
and hilariously, he may be one of the more emotionally intelligent characters in the game.
Yeah,
Actually,
yeah.
I think, which I like
Yeah.
about him. Yeah,
that's
Yeah.
kind of one of those moments where the delivery wasn't good, but he had some solid writing behind it.
but his
I
delivery
think the
was
delivery
good.
is good.
Yeah.
I think that he's genuinely
Because
someone
he's
who's on the
stone-faced?
spectrum. Yes, I
Uh-huh.
think so. Even when the game starts, I don't want to go on too big of a tangent about him. I can kind of identify this stuff because I can kind of relate to that. Like I can do things with my face, but it's more intentional than I think for most people because I'm like my default, especially during a conflict, is fucking stone face, cold voice. That's who I am, and so like I can pick up on that and I can go, oh, he might be on a spectrum or something. So like when he shows emotion. It's very rare. And the one time you see him get angry visibly on his face in the entire game is when Abby tells him that Mel already agreed to go find Joel.
Yeah, and the look on his face is so good at that
It's
moment.
like, that's it.
Yeah, and okay, so that's the other thing is that it leads me to the last thing I wanted to talk about, which is representation in this game. I really love it because we have gotten gamers to play as two different main female characters who are very different from each other and not freak out about it for the most part. There was some internet backlash, blah, 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 about Joel dying. Understandable to the extent that he was arguably the main character of the last game, and one of the first things they do is kill him off as a plot mechanism. So I get that upset. But Abby is kind of a mannish woman by the time she's a full adult. You see her grow from a relatively naive young child, see her bulking up as a young adult, and then you see her version now where she's very Joel-like in how she fights. And if you look up Last of Us is Abby on Google, you'll get, is she a man? Is she transgender? Is she a boy or a girl? And hilariously, why is Abby so buff? You know, and they actually answer some of the questions. When you see her room, she has almost nothing in it but weights.
And
Yeah.
most of her
Takes it very
flashbacks with
seriously.
Owen, she's like, she can't miss training.
She
That's
has, she
right,
has
all
the
the time.
means, and one of the things I think is nuanced, that is that she has the means to get that
Right.
that level of muscle, right? Because she's with the Washington Liberation Front, they have the arena, they have the means to get to that.
They have
whereas
the weight
most
room.
people are just surviving. Like
That's
Ellie
all the
was just
WLF was
surviving.
for her.
They have
That's
a
all the
practice range
WLF
for her
was
to learn to
And then the thing
fight
I
with these assault
loved Abby
weapons.
because her like move set, quote unquote, was a lot more brutal too. So like when you're beating the shit out of runners, she'll like knock one down and stomp its head in, right?
Yeah,
She has a brutal
was
side to her too, which
a
is
soldier,
She
basically.
is a soldier. Right.
as opposed to like the struggling Ellie who like stabs everything in the neck.
Yeah.
But I
and-
will say that while the representation is good, I did not have this thought, but I've heard this thought and I understand this thought, and it is retroactively kind of infuriating. This is a game about two women with daddy issues.
Very true. And it's kind of about their relationship to men to some extent, like Abby's relationship to Owen, which changes her path significantly. And
And
then
her relationship with her dad.
And yeah, even Ellie's relationship to Dina is changed by Dina's relationship with Jesse because she got pregnant, and that changes everything.
At least Lev
So-
had mommy issues.
And a sister. So that's the other bit of representation, right? So at some point they call Love, I forget what the name is.
Lily.
Lily, a girl's name, right?
Yeah.
So Lily, Love is a trans female to male person, clearly. And so at first they explain it as, I'm in trouble with my faith because I cut my hair.
Right.
That's the only and that's literally true,
Mm-hmm.
and that's considered unacceptable.
And Abby's like, tell me the true story.
And well, she's smart enough to know it's not that simple, but she simply accepts it for what it is and accepts the amount that she's told and doesn't ask for anything more. And I think that's actually really nice that we don't go into a big old long explanation of, wow, when did you find out? You know, what does this mean to you? Have you ever considered taking hormones? Like, none of this kind of conversation happens, and nobody cares. It's not about that. It's actually what we focus on with Love is his attempts to save his sister, to meet his mother, and to help Abby get over her fear of heights. So things like that. We
And the
learn more
tragedy,
about that.
he has
Yeah.
to kill his mom.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and it
Yeah.
messes him up. Now he's got his own trauma.
Well,
In case
Lev
that
wouldn't have
wasn't
been able to
enough.
take any hormones because Abby was hoarding all the pills so she can get her upgrades.
Oh no. She literally had all the, what do they call them, supplements or something?
The
Yeah.
best thing about that game is that whenever you find a bathroom, you're like, oh, there are going to be pills
There's
here.
gonna be pearls.
Yeah, but in general, the fact that they put that in and it was a reasonable representation.
Yeah, it wasn't.
Although
they
I
didn't-
I want to do say that like I feel like the same tropes still stand in the sense of like why does it have to be this sort of semi quasi religious sort of organization that doesn't accept someone different? It just sort of is pigeonholing it again like
Yeah, there was
the
a
only
tiny
way we
bit
have
with the
to
scars that pissed
yeah
me off in terms of that othering.
yeah the only way that we have to that these characters are sort of represented, and I mean not just trans, just something in our world that would be typically not accepted by
Right.
some sort of formal organization.
Mhm.
They always have to be the ire of
Right.
all of this hate or all of this
Fortunately,
unacceptance.
fortunately, Lev is a true believer. He respects the actual writings
Yes.
and frames what has happened to the scars as like a tragic thing that they don't know how to read apparently.
He actually
Yeah.
gives Abby sort of scripture to
He,
help
Yeah.
he
her.
believes he's vilified because of how he feels.
Well, and
By his
he feels
community.
like
Yeah.
the Fates took a wrong turn after the death of their original leader, and that's when they
Right.
became more violent, and maybe that's also when they became less tolerant.
Yeah.
So they call him an apostate, and they may very literally mean that he is preaching a version of the faith they disagree with. He may be literally dangerous to their rulers of their
To their
faith.
social order.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So they may want to come after Lev in a similar way that Ellie came after Abby.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised. I would like to see more about the Seraphites and their leaders.
Yeah.
If
Definitely
we have another game.
woman that they keep that what do they call her? The woman that they have follow
The
us or
paintings of and
something.
stuff.
What
Well,
do they say?
she's dead though. She's the we can learn more about her like retroactively,
Yeah.
but I don't know what they called her actually.
Forgot. It was I mean, there was always a phrase whenever you have pictures of her, like "We are the follow us" or something like that, or "We are the way." I forgot what the phrasing was.
Yeah.
But did they ever show who the new leader was
No.
during the
No,
fire?
we never
Okay.
find that out, and that's part of what's interesting. You don't even know if it's one person or a council.
Mm,
And
or
again,
what's
I
going
think
on.
on some level it's important that when we are asked through Abby to empathize with this person / by extension this group of people,
mhm.
that we go to the island and it's framed as a bit of a tragedy that this whole place is on fire and we know very little about them. Yet that does actually draw into what Mikey's saying about we don't know a lot about them. They're framed as just like this mysterious
Yeah.
foreign thing.
Yeah.
And of course they're the intolerant ones. Like, was Lev gonna be any more tolerated in the WLF?
So they call her the prophet. At one point, you do find a piece of paper that gives you her name, and she was a real historical figure who saved her neighborhood by gathering a bunch of supplies before anything bad happened, basically.
Mm.
But beyond that, we don't know much about her, other than that she left behind a whole book of writings that became their sort of Bible.
Yeah,
Cool.
makes sense. She was basically Jesus.
All right, so I think we have a couple of minutes left. Is there any final thoughts from anybody about the game? I think
The
we sort of
game was
made
too long.
our
I
Yeah.
agree, and I think it was on purpose, and I think it was meant to be exhausting. Like,
Uh,
I will say the game is growing on me. Like, I have some
I
distance
think it
from
did
it.
its job, but until the
If it
next game comes
was-
out, I refuse to even pass judgment on this one because they're either going to screw the pooch with the next one, or we're going to see this one differently after we get that in.
For
Matrix
me, if it
Revolution.
was 5 hours shorter, you could have still fit everything you wanted to.
I
into
probably
it.
agree.
Because
Yeah,
it felt
I
agree
loaded
with
with
Steve.
encounters and scavenging.
But
I
I think
agree with Steve.
exhaustion can be good. But anyway.
I think that all of the acts should have stayed, just less enemies and maybe a smaller design. But honestly, I think like everything could be made. It's just exhausting to go through because it's just like there's too many fucking enemies.
Also,
oh my
we
goodness.
just glossed entire. We didn't even touch on the subject of the Rat King.
The Rat King.
The big infected that you
Oh.
fight
Oh
in the
God.
in the
That was a
hospital.
good one. We can talk about that some other
I
time.
didn't.
No,
I
I've
We didn't even
saved
talk
you-
about it.
I didn't care
I've saved
for
you
it.
the discussion of the horse and the dogs. So we're probably just as
I
well.
didn't care for that, but
Yeah.
yeah,
I don't know.
I
It's
did
just,
not.
the infected don't feel like
They're
hurdle
not the
anymore.
stars of the
What-
story. in
what
the
I'll
same
say
way,
is-
except for maybe a couple of encounters.
They're just a hurdle in your way most of the time.
Yep.
In due time, I look forward to playing this game again. I do.
Okay.
Maybe, I don't know.
And
I know I
look forward
played
to
the
the next
original
one, but
one.
I don't know that I would.
I played the first one, I would say about 3 times through. This one I don't see myself going back.
It's a lot longer, but yeah.
Mm. All right.
All
All right.
I think that's it, guys. And we are going to wrap up today's special episode on The Last of Us 2 Spoilercast. You can always find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and we'll see you guys on the next episode. Laters.
Bye.